We also incorporate this throughout the home relative to, this is the kitchen design, and using the idea is in the middle of the night, if you go into the kitchen for a drink of water, a sensor would come on, low-level amber light, preserves your dark adaptation, so when you head back to bed, you've maintained your night vision. Okay. I'm also putting this into, this is the residential marketplace in California. It's a state law that 2020, zero net energy. All new homes have to be zero net energy, which is going to be very difficult. Okay? Now, there's a significant concern with lighting, that lighting needs to support other things than just energy. Okay? And California is perceived as a little bit too much on the efficiency side. So there's a big interest now in incorporating wellness issues. And so builders are very interested in this. So I'm doing one of the largest circadian projects in the United States, and this is all these homes are going to be full circadian in terms of the color change and amber lighting throughout the bathrooms. And so these folks are very interested in this. Okay. So this is kitchen environment. So you get up in the middle of the night, get a drink, go into the kitchen, amber lights come on and support your night vision. Not my bathroom. All my students say, that's your bathroom, isn't it? I said, no, it's not. So again, the two different scenarios here. But this is very typical California bathroom. Californians love large bathrooms. The third element on this for the hospital environments, and this is in my mind one of the most important, and this is color rendering. Okay. And color rendering is this. It's a simple construct. It's the idea that if you look at somebody and you want to see this, okay, the reality is that in hospitals today, they see this. And the reason they see this is that they're using a light source. I have to say to my students, because my dean yells at me when I say something else. Okay? So the reality is that doctors are being asked to make critical medical decisions that are based almost exclusively on vision. And we're putting light sources that make people look like ghosts. Okay? The reality is they want to look like this. Okay? We've done a lot of work on this. This is sort of one of my research areas. And I went out, and I have access to the 5 hospitals in California. This is like one of the larger networks. And all of our hospitals are using this light source, okay? Almost exclusively. So it means that doctors are making critical medical decisions on a lamp that costs $1. Okay. So this is like, doesn't make sense. They should be spending $100 on a lamp. Okay. If you look at medical bills and life-death decisions, and people are buying these lamps for $1 a piece, it doesn't make sense. Okay. So this is what we're putting into hospitals, and it has precious little red content. Okay. So the RGB fools your brain into saying it's white. Okay? But the reality is that when you have this kind of light source, that's what happens. Okay? And we've done all kinds of measurements on this with people looking at this, and it's like when you talk to a doctor about this, when we go through these measurements, this is what happens. But when we show them this side by side, they go, oh, we had no idea. Because a lot of this stuff is, if you say something, it's all relative. Okay, you have to sort of see it side by side. The reality is that this is what's happening in all the California hospitals today. I'm sure there's similar things here in Thailand, but this is what's happening in California. So to make this really sort of understanding color rendering, and why color rendering is like number 3 in the circadian protocol in terms of sort of the foundation, is that this is what we're putting into hospitals. And we're making critical red decisions with no red content. There's no information there, but very little red. And we're trying to make very fine discrimination in tint and chroma. Okay? And these are just, this is sort of color rendering terms. In other words, slightly different shades of red. I mean, a doctor's trying to figure out, do you look like this, you know, or do you look like nice and red? Now that's easy, but if you're trying to make very small variations on this, this is critical. And the medical folks are telling me that on a day-to-day basis, this kind of red judgment is very important. When you really dig into this, it's this kind of discrimination on red content is a very strong describer of wellness in a hospital situation. So what we want is something like this, because this is how our visual system evolved. Our visual system evolved under this. You can see the red content. Now, if you're going in for a medical examination, what light source do you want? This one or this one? It's an easy decision. And so, in the process of this, we're moving all from fluorescent. This is all going away. There are no hospitals being designed in California that have this. Right now, it's a big question mark. What do we do? So what I'm doing is saying we're going to do this. We're going to have strong red content in order to make this kind of color discrimination. And I have support of all the doctors and the medical folks on this. This is color rendering. Okay? If you happen to be a little bit greenish in the hospital, also very important. Okay? So the idea is that making very subtle kinds of discrimination points here between different tints and shades. This, which light source do you want? This one, which has got a very narrow spike in the green, gives you really good information on one particular green. Okay? But if you look at this kind of variation, a lot more data here in this lighting spectrum. Okay? This is what you want inside a hospital. And basically, the kinds of standards that we use for color rendering are black body radiators or daylight. And basically, we biologically evolved under this, and we culturally evolved under this. And these render color really well. Okay, so in terms of color rendering, this is kind of the reference point. And we can do that today. Okay, so people say, oh, cannot do. We can do that today. These are commercially available. This is just one example. This is, if you look at this graph here, this is got very high red content. Okay? And there are commercially available LED light sources with 90 CRI or above today. People say they're expensive, not efficient, not available. Untrue. Okay? It's standard product. And in fact, in 2016, it's going to be a state law in California that you use these light sources. This was something I wrote last year. And so in California, the light sources must be 90 CRI. They must have a high R9. That means a high red content. That means you look nice and red when you look in the mirror, and doctors can make good color decisions. Not my kitchen. But the idea here is that this sort of originated in residential design with the idea of having very high saturated reds for residential. Okay. So bringing all this together, the health and well-being being driven by the dynamic CCT and supporting the melanopsin receptor, sleep, enhanced experience, trips and falls, and then sort of my sort of favorite issue is enhanced performance of doctors relative to color perception. So I'm going to show sort of examples of all these things sort of working to get together. Okay? And so the protocol draws upon all these different pieces of science into sort of one unified protocol. The first one is what we call dark night. I went out to all the 5 hospitals, and there wasn't a single protocol that I could find on dark night. No medical protocol, no nursing protocol, nothing. I couldn't find any protocol that existed. But there was universal medical support that dark nights were important in order to have patients to sleep without having their melanopsin receptor disrupted. They all knew this. But there was no informed policy on ensuring that that happened. And the reality was that most people are sleeping under these kinds of lighting conditions in hospitals. Okay? And there's enough data out there, lots of science out there showing that even at very low light levels, we have disruptions in our circadian balance. Okay? There's lots of good literature on this. So this was a very significant issue. And so dark night means just that. It means that inside the hospital room at night, that there's the capability of having full darkness. This doesn't exist within the 5 hospitals in California. The next one is what we call inspection lighting. Okay? And the inspection lighting was a protocol that we're working on with the medical school. And the idea of having dark night is supported, but the ability to be able to go in and make an examination of a patient without turning on everything was something that was very, very strongly supported. And the idea was that you could maintain most of the time a very dark kind of condition, but you could put light down in a localized and in a dimmable condition. And this was something that pretty strongly supported. So the first thing was you limit all the blue content. So there's no blue pump in this light source, or very low blue pump. So we have minimal impact on the melanopsin receptor, low CCT, high color rendering index. So that means if they're looking for something critical, they can see it. Because if you turn on a fluorescent, you're not going to see it. Also red amber light, with the idea if you want something very biased towards the red, you can do that. And then with a full dimming option. Now, the idea here is that you could do this in a variety of different ways. If you're going in there into a patient just to check to see if they're still breathing or some minimal kind of task, you can do it at a very low light level. Or if you're doing something that's a little bit more involved, you can have a much higher. Now, the key points on this is that it's dimmable, so it allows a choice. 2, there's no blue pump, so there's no disruption, and it's all localized. So this is inspection lighting. This was something that the nurses were very involved with, and they were very supportive of this kind of configuration. The next one is the dynamic CCT, the change throughout the day. And again, that was to get as close as possible to this type of issue here, with the idea that in the morning we have a very cool light source to reset the melatonin, and then towards the evening we gradually reduce the color temperature, not to disrupt sleep. So this is part of the lab here, the idea that we can go from a whole range of different color temperatures. This is all commercially available, standard. We can do this today. There's nothing fancy about this or expensive or unreasonable. Okay? This can all be done. And the idea here is, again, is just like we were doing at the Circadian house. We're going to be doing this in the hospital with the idea that we can go from a very low color temperature all the way up to a very high color temperature. And the tests and experimental work that we've done, most people don't notice that the lights have changed. Now, if you see it side by side, they say, yeah, a big difference here. But if you ask the uninformed person, they said, you're changing the lights? So they're not very surprised. And also the integration of red amber, so that you can have long periods of red amber after your normal sunset time. So if you've got a typical, say, 8 o'clock sunset, that you may go into an amber array as well.